Welcome to day 86. We are starting the book of Judges today. We will be looking at verses 1 through 3 and the 12th chapter of the book of First Corinthians. So Judges begins, Joshua has passed away, and there is no clear leader for the people of Israel at this time. We've got 12 different tribes living in different areas. They're kind of in charge of their own area, but sometimes they need to work together on battles, on different things that they have to agree on. And so Judah ends up taking the lead and goes into battle and captures some more land for the Israelites, including Jerusalem. But it says that they do not manage to push out any of the people who live along in the plain area, the open plains area along the Mediterranean Sea. And they state that this is because they have iron technology. Now, the flip side of this is that we can read into it that the Israelites do not have iron technology. So we're talking about a difference here, not just of the gods that are worshiped by people and a cultural and perhaps language difference, but there's also a technological difference. And the people of Israel are not the ones with the latest, greatest gadgets, that actually the Canaanites or the Philistines who live along the shore of the Mediterranean Sea have a greater technology arsenal that includes iron and iron chariots. So Jerusalem has been conquered, but we then read that the tribe of Benjamin, who lives in that area, lives side by side with the Jebusites in Jerusalem. So the Benjaminites might be in charge of Jerusalem, but they don't manage to get rid of everyone who's living there. So they live together. And then we get a list of other tribes that captured some land, but maybe not all the land in their allotments, and that they don't get rid of everyone who was living there before they got there. So Manasseh, Ephraim, Zebulun, Asher, Naphtali, they all are listed as living with neighbors that they couldn't push out, neighbors who worship different gods and had different cultures and traditions. There is a segment here that points out that God's not entirely happy with this and that there will be consequences for not completing the takeover of the land that God has given them. We then read about how a new generation is growing up and they don't know God or worship God, and that they've turned to other gods. So this is a section of the Old Testament where we're going to be thinking about how the leaders of the Exodus are now gone. Moses is gone, Miriam, Aaron, Joshua are all gone. God is going to be, as we read through Judges, raising up a new set of leaders referred to as judges. These are not kings, these are not generals, they're judges. And the test for Israel is, are they going to give in to the neighbors around them and their ways? Or are they going to stay true to God? And I think in some ways we can reflect on this about some of the struggles we are having as the church today. Within my lifetime, I have seen how the church struggled as the baby boomers became teenagers and young adults, and they wanted to have long hair for the men. They wanted to be barefoot. They wanted to wear different clothes. They wanted different music in church. And a lot of churches really struggled in the late 60s and early 70s with some of those cultural changes. I remember in the 90s, there were some spectacular worship wars at different churches between praise bands and traditional organ hymn type worship services. And all of these periods of conflict have also weakened the church in that new generations have often said, I don't want to be in a fight. I don't want to deal with this. And they have wandered away from church. Now, we may say they're not going off and worshiping the gods of Egypt or Baal and Ashtoreth, but in some ways it's more insidious. They've simply given up a developing spiritual life. They have gone off and are simply living without the strength and comfort of God in their lives. And so I think it's easy to look back here and say, yeah, they were inconsistent. They were with God. They wandered away. They came back. They wandered away. But sometimes I think we need to really think about, what are we doing? Are we being gracious and generous and opening up the church that God has given to us for the season of our lives, but made it so that new people, new believers feel welcome coming in and being a part of this church and making it their own church so that they can be stewards for the next generation? These are really tough things to think about. So in the end, as we go through Judges and the prophets, we are going to see a cycle where the people lose to other powers, the Israelites. They cry out to God, God saves them, and then they wander away again. This is a cycle that's going to happen over and over and over and over and over and over again. We've already seen it several times, and we're going to see it a lot of times going forward. So, another thing, in addition to how are we encouraging new generations in faith, is why can't we stay focused on God? I think the first thing is we have to look at ourselves. What is our personal relationship with God? How do we continue to grow our relationship with God as individuals? Then, how are we helping the people around us build personal relationships with God? And then finally, how are we building a church family to help people stay connected to God? When we turn to chapter 12, Paul is talking about spiritual gifts and that we are all different. There's great variety in us. God has given us different gifts that we can bring to the church and bring to our communities. We have power through variety. That if all of us were thumbs, if all of us were eyes, our body wouldn't be very powerful. If all of us were preachers or if all of us were caregivers, our church would be stymied in its growth and its ability to provide ministry to the community. One of the things that Paul is pointing out here is that we need to give each other the space for using our gifts. We need to recognize the value of each other's gifts and each of our own authority to use the gifts that God has given us. God wants us to use our own intelligence and make decisions for ourselves. For whatever reason, God did not make us as robots and God did not program us with all the right answers. For some reason, God gave us free will and we have to make choices and we have to go through the messy work of trying to figure out how to live together in community because we are not controlled by God. Now, one of the debates in our country right now that is a trigger for a lot of people is this whole idea of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. At the core, though, this is one approach that our community has had over generations of trying to figure out how do we as a diverse nation, the United States, come together in a way that we give people opportunities, that we give people access to privileges and to rights, to property, to opportunities. Um, there have been many ways that we have tried to live together. Right now, we have a debate over whether DEI was a good idea and was achieving the goals that we wanted to achieve. But I think the core thing we have to be looking at is how do we live together? How do we deal with different appearances and different opinions and different life experiences? It is not an easy thing to build community. And as you read through this letter to the Corinthians, we can tell that the people of Corinth were having the same struggles that we're having today. So Paul really emphasizes that God gives us our gifts and we are to use them to honor God and to build community. One of the things that our church is offering is a special assessment that you can go through and then discuss with the pastor of what are the gifts that God has given you and how are you using them. As we go through different phases of our life, sometimes our gifts change, sometimes we use them in different ways. So today we have many people who've met with me and they feel a strong gift for hospitality, a strong gift for caring for our facility. Maybe they love teaching young people. Maybe they love caring for homebound residents or caring for caregivers who often feel isolated. Some people love to serve. Some people love to give. How do we provide ministry opportunities for all of these people and celebrate their ministries? So one of the things that Paul suggests is that we need to set aside labels. We should not be looking at the labels of Jew or Greek or slave or free, which makes me wonder, what are the labels that we love these days? And what are the labels that we keep putting on people? Some of the big labels right now that are really causing a lot of division in our country are political labels like Republican or Democrat, racial labels such as white or black. What about labels about our citizenship? Are you an immigrant? Are you native born? What about labels of simply new and old? I've been here longer than you. You just got here. What about labels within our church, such as who's a member, who's not a member, what kind of member are you? These are all things that divide us. These are all things, though, that are also part of our identity and part of a variety. And some of these things are really important to us. So, how can we honor these differences, but still find a way to be part of something that is bigger than ourselves? How can we be reminded that it's not about us and our own personal preferences, but it's about God's plan and Jesus' salvation as a gift for all people? One of the most powerful things I think Paul points out here is that when one part of the body hurts, all of us hurt. And there are many ways that people are hurting these days. And we need to always be thinking, what can we be doing to reduce the hurt within the body? We'll talk to you next time. Bye bye.